What's going on, guys? This is Carter Karels with GigEm 247 here at Williams-Brice Stadium after a stunning 44-20 loss for Texas A&M. Here at South Carolina, they have stormed the field. People still out there, but they're trying to clear them all off. So I'm going to do the post-game analysis up here. But a humbling loss for this Aggie team that had everything in front of them, was in the driver's seat, only undefeated team in conference play in the SEC left. They blow that tonight, and now if they want to make the playoff, if they want to make the SEC championship game, they got to win out, including a game at the very end of the season, a big one against a very good Texas team. So a crushing loss. You win this game, and really that Texas game may not matter for you, but now, you know, you lose that game and you're out for sure. And so kind of a game that, where do you even begin with this A&M team? So many things went wrong today. A nightmarish start, but and a nightmarish second half. But to me, the biggest one is just the defense and the tackling, the run defense, the tackling. So many missed tackles from this defense tonight. It had to be 20-plus missed tackles, even worse than what we saw in the Notre Dame game when they had something like 18 or 20 missed tackles. And, you know, Lenore Sellers, we've seen it this season. You know, he's had the ankle injury, but when healthy, this is a guy that's really difficult to bring down. Obviously, Rocket Sanders at running back is a guy that has had a lot of success in college football, and A&M just could not bottle up those two guys. Had so many opportunities to bring Lenore Sellers down, so many blitzes that got home, and they're right there. You had Damian Sanford later in the game. You had Scooby Williams on the first drive, just missing those tackles, just missing those sacks. And not only are you missing out on these negative plays, but they lead to big plays, right? Like first drive of the game, Scooby Williams has him with a clean hit, misses it on a 2nd and 10, and Lenore Sellers beats him by, you know, completing a 20-yard pass to Rocket Sanders, which obviously led to the touchdown drive. You get that sack, all of a sudden, you know, it's 3rd and 16 or something, and it's a 3-and-out for South Carolina. So a lot of game-changing missed tackles that just beat the Aggies time and again. South Carolina had over 250 rushing yards today. Tons of that came after contact. Just seemed like they were running right a ton and finding a lot of angles, finding a lot of holes. Not a great game from the linebackers for Texas A&M. Curious to rewatch it and just see how many blown assignments there were, because it just felt like there were not only so many openings, but also you had the missed tackles along with that. A lot of short passes that would turn into huge gains that you'd see him throw it to Rocket Sanders in the flat, and a guy would miss a tackle and he'd run 30 yards. It just happened time and again in this game, especially in missed opportune moments. You know, the offense had its problems today, but it just feels like the defense time and again was struggling to make those plays when it mattered, and really biting, you know, shooting itself in the foot. Penalties were another huge issue for this team. I got to single out somebody, Shamar Turner. 2 personal foul penalties today. One of them led to the field goal at the end of the half. It's become a problem. The guy is a personal foul machine. Always seems to have a late hit every game. Always seems to be doing something just a little too dirty or a little too after the play. And yeah, they've gotten away with it for, you know, a few games, but this is the game where it felt like the penalties really came up and bit them in the butt. Offensively, you know, you start Marcel Reed. You know what, I'm going to start walking, because I know I've got to at least have some excitement in this video. So we're going to walk in the bones of Williams-Brice Stadium. But you look at this offense, and it really sucked losing Le'Veon Moss early in the game till it looked to be a pretty brutal right knee injury. Catches a 20-yard pass on the sideline, gets hit really hard in the right knee, went to the tent, was in the tent for a very long time, ended up getting carted to the locker room between the first and the second quarter. out for the game. And we did talk to Mike Elko after the game, and he did say, hey, it's not as bad as it looked. But they do have a bye week coming up. They have New Mexico State next after that. Could he be back later this season? That would be huge news for this Texas A&M team. But as far as this game was concerned, losing that guy, obviously had been playing at a first-team All-SEC, second-team All-SEC kind of level. I think he was second in the league in rushing entering today. You lose that guy, and it was really felt in these pivotal short yardage situations. That was the biggest thing for this offense. They couldn't get a yard when it mattered. Now, some of that you could attribute to play calling, you could attribute it to the defense, but man, it just seemed like every situation where they needed a yard, they couldn't get it. And I want to single out those 2 4th and 1s because, man, talk about a risky situation you're putting yourself in, going for those 2 4th and 1s and not getting them. The first one being, you're down 7-0. South Carolina's got all the momentum. They got the raucous crowd and everything. I'm going to go back in here. It's a little loud. But you're down 7-0, and then you're going for it at your own 34, 4th and 1, third play of your offense's game. I don't like that. And then not only are you going for it, but your 180-pound quarterback, dripping wet, is doing a quarterback sneak. And, they kind of came up to the line of scrimmage, acted like they might call a timeout, went back to the line of scrimmage. Oh, are we going to run the play? Are we going to run the play? Then they run the play, and by the time that they were in the play, the defense was ready, they were amped up, and the offense was kind of on its heels and snapped the ball kind of at the last second. It was just a bad play from the start. You knew it wasn't going to work, especially not when you're sneaking your 180-pound quarterback. I'd get it if the guy's 220 pounds. You have Max Johnson last year doing that. I get that. But 180-pound Marcel Reed, that's not his forte. And I didn't get that call at all. The second half, they did it when they were down 7 and didn't work and led to 10 points alone. Obviously, South Carolina took over after that, first failed 4th down conversion, got a touchdown. The second time, they got a field goal. But just felt very risky on Mike Elko's part, especially that first one. The first one, to me, I just did not get it at all. And I get it if you want to say, hey, this is a team that ranked 10th in rushing offense going into the game, and we're going to give it to Le'Veon Moss, and he's the guy, and we trust him. I get that. But Marcel Reed, 180 pounds, I don't get that at all. And so I felt like that really put this team in such a hole to go down 14-0, and you got a redshirt freshman at QB who, honestly, I felt like he navigated a really intense, tough situation pretty well. You think about it, going down 14-0, and you've only had 4 plays in the game, and battled this team back, actually took the lead in the second quarter, 20-17, before South Carolina ended up tying it before halftime. But I actually felt like he responded pretty well to that adversity early on. Wasn't a perfect game by any means for Marcel Reed, but given the circumstances, I think he did a pretty good job. But yeah, those short yardage situations, those mistakes, it felt like there were a lot of bad play calls tonight. You think about the fourth quarter, 2nd and 15, you're in South Carolina territory and you're running the football. Hadn't really been working for you. You don't have Le'Veon Moss. You're giving it to E.J. Smith, who's effectively the 3rd-team running back. And if Ruben Owens doesn't get hurt this year, he's a 4th-team running back. And you're giving it to your reserve running back, 2nd and 15. You need to be throwing the football. And what happened, they ended up drawing up a 3rd and 14. Then they take a sack, and they have to punt it, 4th and 21. That's not going to win you games, calling those kind of plays in that situation. I think this is a game where Colin Klein's going to look at and say, man, there are a lot of plays that I want back in certain situations. And I think that was certainly atop the list. Marcel Reed, another thing I want to mention, it just seemed like today South Carolina did an excellent job bottling up the zone read and the kind of the option running game that A&M got going so well against LSU. LSU looked so unprepared last week defending it. It was almost like they didn't know who Marcel Reed was. It was like it was the first time they'd ever seen him. And every time he pulled the ball, it was wide open. You had two guys crash on the running back. He said, okay, cool, I'll just run past all you guys. This time there wasn't any of that. And I asked Marcel Reed after the game, like, were they really focused on that? And he said, absolutely. It wasn't really there all game. Had 46 yards rushing at the end, but a lot of that came on scrambles or designed runs, not kind of the option running game. And I think that's kind of the difference you saw today. They still ended up with about 150 yards rushing despite losing Moss, but it wasn't efficient. It wasn't, a whole ton of, runs that kind of set up other things, and kind of that option running game from Reed. What else is there to cover? Randy Bond, unsung hero. Want to give him some props. Hit the 55-yarder. He's somebody that has caught a lot of flack in his time at Texas A&M, and didn't have a great year last year. And he's only missed 2 field goals all season. They both came against Florida, and they were in raining conditions. So got to give that guy props. I think he came through tonight. I thought Jabari Barber had a pretty nice game, made some really nice catches. Again, I think Reed, considering the circumstances, played pretty well. I have to give South Carolina a lot of credit. I mean, first of all, that defensive line of theirs came alive in the second half. That whole defense was swarming at times in the second half, and again, did a great job bottling up Reed as a runner. They were as advertised defensively, and just felt like A&M couldn't get anything consistently going offensively. And, obviously, offensively, South Carolina really knew how to beat A&M, get them in space, get them to where, hey, one guy has to make a tackle on the perimeter. That's how you beat this A&M team. You saw Notre Dame do it. You saw LSU do it in the first half against A&M. You've seen it time and again where if you get these guys in space, they can really struggle to make tackles. Some really unfortunate, untimely things. I talk about the penalties. Cassius Howell had a strip, recovered it, ran it all the way back to the 30 of A&M. No, it was a holding penalty on the defense. I believe it was on B.J. Mays. It was kind of a 6-point swing. Maybe you get a field goal if you're A&M with that return that he had, but instead it leads to a South Carolina field goal, if I remember correctly. Will Lee had a big holding penalty on a 3rd and 9 there in the fourth quarter that really was not smart. I mean, he just basically hugged the guy for 5 yards, and it was an easy call for the officials. But anyway, a lot of things you could talk about in this game. I think from a coaching perspective, there were a lot of things you could point to. Why are you going for it in these certain situations? You can maybe say, why are you not going for it? There was a time, I think there was 4th and 1, and you got about 6 minutes left, down 10, and you're not going for it. And I think Elko's reasoning after the game was, hey, didn't get the previous 2 4th and 1, so didn't want to do it again. But at a certain point, you had to say, hey, you're down 10 with like 6 minutes left. You kind of have to take the risk now. This South Carolina team, definitely want to give them a lot of credit, though, again, because entering this game, they're 4 and 3. But really, they could have been 6 and 1. Almost beat LSU, almost beat Alabama. It felt like they kind of exercised some demons today, where this is a team that's better than advertised, maybe. But because of whether it's injuries at quarterback or just not making the 1 or 2 plays it takes to win these kind of games, they couldn't do it. And today, they obviously did. And so a good South Carolina team. But this is an A&M team, again, you want to win big this year. This is kind of the games you have to win. And now you're sitting at 7-2, 5-1 in conference. You've got 3 games left. You got the bye week next week, New Mexico State, Auburn, Texas. We kind of looked at the next 2 games as easy wins for A&M. I still feel that way. Mexico State and Auburn have been pretty bad this season. So you'd like to think this team will be 9-2 going into that Texas game, but now all of a sudden, going in this game, he said, hey, you win this game, you lose to Texas and you're fine. Now you have to beat Texas if you want to do something. Now, we can decide later on, what all that means. I still think if this team goes 9-3 this year, it's a pretty successful year one under Mike Elko, but still feels like a wasted opportunity when you consider the schedule and just how this season has unfolded for A&M, coming into this game 7-1 and being the only team left in the SEC with an undefeated record. So that's about it for me today, guys. 44-20, South Carolina, an impressive win for Shane Beamer, and A&M will need to regroup coming this week, and we'll give you guys updates on Le'Veon Moss when we hear it. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.